What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Oh man, this feud. It was one of the funnest times for me, There was a lot of bad stuff, but when I look at this time period, I look at it with fondness. SmackDown, in my opinion, was blowing Raw out of the water in many aspects. One of them being the ever-changing main event scene. It really helped. Like, beginning of the year, you had Batista, Rey, and Taker feuding for the title. By WrestleMania season, it was Edge and Chris Jericho. There was some duds there, but I have fond memories of 09-10 SmackDown. After the draft, though, we got to see a million iterations of Kofi Kingston versus Dolph Ziggler, and Lay Cool running rampant, which is a whole other story. We got to see the Kane title reign, which I thought was very good. He was dominant and awesome. Anyways, Edge and Chris Jericho. These guys go way back, all the way up to 2002 where they had a minor feud. By minor, I mean it lasted for a couple of weeks, I believe. This one, though, was for the World Heavyweight Championship. Regardless of the title, Edge was in storyline hell-bent on coming at Jericho for snide remarks, his comments back in July and December. Edge's face turn to many was disappointing because it felt off, but looking back, it was supposed to be a fresh change from a 5.5-year heel run. I think they did it better later on in the year after the Kane feud. And Chris Jericho, I should mention, he was at his peak in terms of pecking order in WWE. He wasn't treated like a mid-carder like he was for most of his run. He was a certified main eventer. For example, if you ask someone who did WWE value the most in 2009, like they give you a top 5, I'm pretty sure Jericho is in the list. No pun intended. The guy for me was MVP of 2009 WWE, and he just couldn't do any wrong during this time period. Ricky Steamboat, he had a classic with him. He did the DX thing, he had the Jericho thing. He was just very good. Okay, enough of the introductions, let's get into it. Anyways, as you know, these two were already tag team partners. They were said to have a great run, but Edge got hurt. It was a tear in his Achilles tendon, and it occurred at the worst time, when WWE wanted to legitimize the tag team division. Despite both men teaming up, there was still preliminary plans for them to face off at WrestleMania 26. Edge gets injured, and there's doubt over whether or not it happens, and I tried searching for who would have been Jericho's opponent, but I couldn't find anything. Luckily, Edge recovers ahead of time, but during his recovery, Chris Jericho was all about the insults. On the July 17, 2009 episode of SmackDown, Edge was interviewed via satellite by Jim Ross and Todd Grisham. The Rated R superstar was clearly upset over the injury. Why wouldn't he? And it seemed like there was a gloomy future ahead of him. The fans didn't like this either, but he tried to be positive and hoped for a speedy and successful recovery. As he was discussing the topic of Chris Jericho, he decides to interrupt. Jericho was sick of this and he refused to hear this hypocritical speech. Y2J thought it was selfish of Edge to get injured, stating that he doesn't care about me. And for that, he's going to find a better tag team partner to continue this dominant reign. Jericho wasn't done. He criticized Edge's way of winning titles by politicking and being at the right place at the right time, whereas he wins them by being the best in the world at what he does. The insults continued from there on, and Jericho called Edge's list of injuries his biggest success or failure. He said that he's weak, frail, and pathetic. He even acknowledged Edge's pandering to the sycophants, and at this moment, the Rated R superstar had enough of this. And while he said that while he's not an angel, he didn't need somebody like Chris Jericho to make an attack on his character and his durability. Despite this, he was going to use it as motivation for his recovery. He promised that if, scratch that, when he comes back, he'll prove him wrong. Fast forward to December. Chris Jericho at this point had just come off an impressive 5-month title reign with The Big Show, and on this night in particular, he won the Tag Team of the Year award. He thanked the long and forgotten Edge for being cowardly and selfish enough in relinquishing his half of the Tag Team Championships. Jericho ended up parting ways with Big Show, and it was time to focus on the Royal Rumble. As expected, he was claiming to be the one, remember that promotional thing for that year? And during the match, he entered at number 27. He got an AA, but managed to bounce back by eliminating Kofi Kingston, and it was time for number 29. The countdown goes in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, You think you know me. Yep. Michael Cole reacts as he does, Oh my, that's it. And Edge is back. Right out of the gate, he delivers a plethora of spears before throwing out his former tag team partner. The fans were absolutely happy to see Edge, and it was clear that he was a good guy. They already planted the seeds. He wasn't underappreciative of the fans' support for him. He ended up winning. With that said, for some reason, Stryker recited the lyrics of Edge's song on this day. I don't know, he's random. And at this point, I believe Batista was originally going to win it if Edge wasn't going to return in time, but it clearly wasn't to be. Later that week on SmackDown, Edge was set to host his own talk show, The Cutting Edge, with the guest being a potential WrestleMania opponent, The Undertaker. Before that went down, Chris Jericho kicked off the show. He complained about how he isn't standing before the audience as the Royal Rumble winner. All of it was taken away in 10 seconds by Edge. And Jericho thought it wasn't fair because Edge appeared unannounced and Chris deserved it. While he's out rehabbing the Achilles, I've been flipping arenas, winning championships, blah, blah, blah. And he was sick of hearing about Edge after only a couple of days. He reminded the fans that Edge is a con artist, and he's the same man who has no heart, no passion, and he was selfish enough to leave me stranded. And now he's going to the main event, whereas I have nothing. Y2J absolutely refused to settle for nothing, and the fact that he was supposed to qualify for the Elimination Chamber also irritated him. So he called out Teddy Long, who proceeded to not come out. Jericho ran to the back, and once he opened the general manager's office, he met Edge. It seemed like he suffered some sort of PTSD or something with the look on his face, and Edge held Jericho responsible for lighting the fire in him, and for that, he thanks him, because he created a monster. Jericho's response, "You'll regret you came back," to which Edge shouted, "No, you will regret it." So at this point, it seemed like Edge was looking for redemption, blah, blah, blah. We all know that. It's obvious. I don't need to say it. And later that night, Edge hosted his show with the world champion, The Undertaker. Before Taker came out, the Rated R Superstar discussed the trials and tribulations of returning, and he thought it was worth it because he's going to be in the main event of WrestleMania. Edge mentioned the Sheamus ordeal from Monday, teasing a move to Raw, and before the champion can even come out, Chris Jericho, who managed to qualify for the Chamber, stormed down to the ring. He complained about how he's deserving of winning, to which Edge responded with a very concrete, undebatable rebuttal. "I eliminated you." Edge was very angry with Jericho's statements from earlier on and how he was trying to make a potential career-ending injury a punchline. He was sick of Y2J claiming that he's the best in the world at what he does, and he's sick of their stupid suits, and as a matter of fact, he's sick of his face altogether. And CM Punk comes out. He described them as pill-popping junkies who are arguing over the remaining fix. He was promoting his little SES and proclaimed himself to be the victor at the Chamber. And then the lights went out. The Undertaker respawns and Edge joins him in clearing house. And it was chaos, you guys know that. And at one point, Edge teased a spear. Matt Striker's narrating the whole thing, and they signaled a teaser for WrestleMania 26. Heading into the Elimination Chamber, Edge had yet to make an official decision on who he was going to challenge. He was waiting and waiting and waiting. And at this point, it could have been anyone. Hell, Ted DiBiase Jr. could have been a potential opponent for WrestleMania. And despite having a match to prepare for, Chris Jericho once again came out to whine about how he deserved to win or whatever. He found it ironic how Edge never mentioned his name as a potential opponent, and he attributed this to bad luck, meaning bad things happen to Edge when he's around Chris Jericho. Jericho stuck it to the Rated R Superstar, stating that he doesn't know what it's like to make a triumphant return. Why? Because he doesn't get injured. He wins championships. He suggested Edge choose the WWE title because the SmackDown winner is going to be himself. Hell, Chris Jericho even guaranteed victory for the Chamber match. And if Edge has any doubt over whether or not he's going to win next Sunday, he should watch his match with The Undertaker. As for how that went, Jericho had a hard time, but Edge made it easy for him with a spear on The Undertaker. This was because Taker blasted him earlier on for no apparent reason. On the final SmackDown before the Elimination Chamber, Chris Jericho gave his final thoughts regarding Sunday. He listed his past world title victories, generated a "you suck" chant, and made his victory last week seem hard fought. Before he can finish his promo, once again, Edge interrupts. This time, he agreed with Jericho on beating The Undertaker. It's an elite accomplishment, but he had a problem with the claim. Jericho didn't show the entire picture. How he, Edge, helped him win. Edge claimed that Chris isn't as good as he thinks he is, and if it wasn't for the spear, he probably wouldn't have even won the match. Once again, Chris suggested Edge go for the WWE Championship because bad things happen whenever he's around. This frustrated the Ultimate Opportunist, and was ready to knock out that condescending, holier-than-thou look on his face. For some reason, the lights went out, and Edge took advantage with a spear. So it was building up, and it was becoming more and more clear that this was going to be a title match. Obviously, I mean, think about it. Shawn Michaels' challenge was rejected, and it makes sense. At the Chamber, Chris Jericho captured his 6th World Championship. It was one hell of a match. I thoroughly enjoyed it for a couple of reasons. John Morrison, CM Punk doing whatever the hell he was doing. That mini match he had with Ray, the one-on-one bout Chris Jericho and Taker had, I liked it. Now, obviously, the best part of them all was the conclusion. I mean, we all know Shawn Michaels cost Taker the title. Things were so bad with The Undertaker that HBK practically gifted his arch nemesis the world title. Being the show-off that he is, Chris Jericho didn't wait until Friday to gloat about his victory. As a matter of fact, he appeared on Raw. "You suck" chances he's shouting, "I'm going to WrestleMania." He called himself the most valuable performer, and even though he said he'll never come back to Raw, he changed his mind because he beat 5 of the best superstars in an Elimination Chamber match. I mean, it was already WrestleMania for that guy. He was gaining heat for days. I mean, fans absolutely despise the guy. But Edge put a damper to this little celebration. He emerged from the crowd with a spear, and he announced his decision. Chris Jericho will go to WrestleMania and face him. So it's confirmed. Chris Jericho didn't let the spear ruin his week because on Friday, same thing. "I'm the world champion, WrestleMania, blah, blah, blah." And damn, that's a cool looking belt. He obviously discussed the incident from Monday, calling it a night where the fans can bask in his glory, and he believed that he didn't deserve this spear. Edge, on the other hand, he congratulated him. Obviously, he screwed up the entire thing by calling himself the best in the world because Edge rebounded by calling him the best in the world to get speared by him. So Chris Jericho. Edge comes out praising the guy for winning the title and whatever, and he has to ruin it by calling himself the best in the world. He mentioned Jericho's previous accomplishments but added a spear to the end. You beat Austin and Rock in the same night. Spear. You beat 3 legends at WrestleMania. Spear. What the hell's going on? And so it began. The irrational love of the word spear. Edge believed that the spear was getting to Chris mentally, and the word got out to the audience. They started chanting, and he thought Jericho was consumed by him. He wakes up in the morning, he sees him. Goes to sleep at night, he has nightmares about Edge. And despite all of this, Edge wanted him at the very top level because he didn't want to hear any excuses at WrestleMania. He warned him, saying that if he goes into WrestleMania with the doubt lingering in his mind, well, spear. Jericho's response, "You will never beat me," and he proceeds to blast him. Jericho ends up screwing up, and you guessed it, spear. WWE capitalizing on a lot of stuff and forcing chants or whatever. I find it weird how WWE never sold a spear shirt during this time period. Now, at this point, Edge was competing. I just didn't mention it because it seems quite obvious. It took him a while to gain form, Tony Chimmel, meanwhile, began having a little voice crack, the Rated R Superstar thing. And the core of Edge's character sort of remained in my eyes, but he was more comedic and had an uncontrollable addiction to using the word spear. And once again, Jericho tried attacking Edge after his match with the Big Show, but he received a spear. But Chris Jericho was going to bounce back in a big way. On the March 12, 2010 episode of SmackDown, the World Heavyweight Champion brought back the highlight reel. Now, at this point, Jericho ditched the whole thing because it was the old him, it was beneath him, but it was a one-time thing. It would, however, return about 2 years later on a regular basis. Edge was all smiles for this one, and he thought that the only highlight that's went on recently is whenever Chris takes a move that he doesn't know the name of, Execution. Chris, though, cared less about the mindless drone. He's calling him these random-ass words. And unlike Edge, he's an honest man. He's truthful, and yes, they could have been the greatest tag team of all time, but Edge got hurt. He reminded him of WrestleMania 19 and how he put on a classic with Shawn Michaels, whereas Edge was sitting at home. The whole thing wasn't a big deal to him because in his time away, Jericho lost to Shawn Michaels and Christian. The challenger admitted that, hey, I get injured, but it's because I take risks, I jump off ladders, I fall into flaming tables, and while my style took years off my career, I do it with adversity and without fear. And at WrestleMania, Edge said that he'll take whatever risk to win back his World Heavyweight Championship. Chris called him a fraud, stating that he's never succeeded on his own, and the most success he's gotten was when he was with Vicky Guerrero. Edge thought it was touche and mentioned how everybody's got a girlfriend that they regret. For him, it's Vicky, but for Jericho, it's Big Show. And he's going to take those risks to win the title. Chris reminded him, bad things happen to you when I'm around. He rushed his recovery in order to win the Royal Rumble. That's going to cost him because he isn't fully healed. And while everyone wants to see WrestleMania conclude with Edge as champion, the reality is that at WrestleMania, he's going to beat Edge. And on top of that, he's going to hurt him. And he guaranteed it, as a matter of fact. Edge, though, quite the contrary. He's going to make Jericho an ex-world champion, and he's going to do it with the spear. And this struck a nerve in Jericho because he blasted the Rated R Superstar with a mic and dished out an assault. The whole thing flipped on its head, and Edge hit the execution. Spear chants intensified, and he's ready to go for it. But Jericho had the title in hand. He blasted Edge with it, and he mocked everybody by repetitively saying, spear, spear, spear. So basically, Chris Jericho began getting not irritated, but so damn exasperated by the 5-letter word. Unbeknownst to me, on WrestleMania Rewind Raw, Chris Jericho faced Shawn Michaels for the final time. I almost missed this, but it's vital. So during the match, HBK gains momentum. Chris Jericho decides, you know what, not tonight. Edge, though, rushes out there and whoops his ass, and yes, he did receive the execution. He repeated the 5-letter word before walking away. Later that week on SmackDown, Edge wanted to pay back the favor by hosting the Cutting Edge with Chris Jericho. The world champion was ever so wise, bringing out his rookie Wade Barrett. And first of all, Edge thought they were dressed for prom. Second, he considered this entire thing to be a game of chess. Who makes the first move. And the Rated R Superstar was very confident he was going to strike first with the spear. Jericho thought that the occasion might be far too big for Edge to live up to the hype because, well, it's WrestleMania. He wasn't going to live up to the expectations of the Parasites, and apparently Jericho was under the belief that Edge was secretly hurt. In his eyes, all it takes is one accident to tear the Achilles. What if he deliberately goes after it? He cited David Beckham tearing his earlier that week, and Edge admitted that he still might be injured, but nobody knows. He said that there's only one way to find out. He's trying to get Jericho to go for his move first, but he didn't. So he decides to strike. This was a risky approach because the Achilles practically made him a target, but he was in form, and look at that crowd. They know what's coming. Spear. Jericho, though, outsmarted him with a code breaker to stand tall. That wasn't it, though. He proceeded to step into that Achilles tendon before saying the 5-letter word. So basically, Chris Jericho was the most intelligent guy in the roster. He knows what's up. Edge, though, he knew that his days could be numbered, but he didn't care because, well, he wanted the world title. That's how I see things. On the final SmackDown before WrestleMania, Chris Jericho took it to the arena once again to give his final thoughts regarding his title match in Phoenix. Jericho praised Edge, stating that he has every tool to win except for one thing: DNA. You suck chants intensified, and the champion explained how his DNA is superior to the fans' and Edge's. And it's his superior DNA that's made him a 6-time world champion. Edge is inferior, simply put. It's his DNA that causes him to get injured, and while it's not his fault that he's constantly injured, it's in there. And that's how Jericho will guide himself to victory. He's going to take advantage of the inferior DNA. He'll stomp that ankle, lock him in the walls, bend it back until the tendon ruptures into 1,000 pieces. And after that match, when Edge has fallen, he's going to wonder, why is my career over? Jericho suggested he doesn't blame anybody but his inferior DNA, and he interrupted. Edge quickly ran into the ring, booted Jericho, and almost hit the spear, but Chris bolted just in the nick of time. Unfortunately for him, the title wasn't in his hands, and Edge obviously posed with it. So for 8 months, it's gradually built up to this. You know, I honestly feel this WrestleMania is a bit underappreciated. I hope to cover in a couple of months to explain why. And the build-up for this one can be summed up with 2 words: Achilles and spear. The match itself for me delivered, but one problem some had with it was the fact that they expected more. Also, if you look at the story, the idea was that Edge is winning, right? Anyways, the match to me was very great. Doesn't mean it was one of the elite WrestleMania matches. Maybe not. Something minor was missing from it, but still excellent stuff. I don't like rating matches, you guys know this, but if I was forced to say, like, you put a gun to my head, 4 stars. It might be a bit too much. I felt like it was a 4-star match. They told a story with Jericho working on the ankle, some exciting near falls. Jericho got desperate at one point despite the Achilles and blasted Edge with a belt, yet he kicked out. It seemed like Edge was really going to win it. The fans were into it, but it abruptly ended just like that with a code breaker. Once again, I think they could have went for another 5 minutes, and the finish itself felt a bit deflating. I don't know, like, it was off. It wasn't Nakamura AJ Styles disappointing, because that match, I disliked that match. I don't know what the hell I expected. But this one in particular, I feel like the result really affected the quality of the match. If they had Edge win and then and there, it would have gotten the crowd to explode. Nonetheless, it's an overlooked gem that I think you'll enjoy watching. Afterwards, Chris tried to finish the job, but this would backfire in a huge way because Edge speared him out of sight. So basically, Chris Jericho signed his own death sentence with this one. If he hadn't touched Edge, he wouldn't have taped ribs. On the April 2nd, 2010 episode of SmackDown, things changed in a big and perhaps terrible way. Depends on your opinion once again. So Chris Jericho opens the show. He has a little problem in the ribcage area, but it doesn't matter because he's still world champion, thereby proving he's the best in the world at what he does. Jericho claimed that he was right in believing Edge's DNA was inferior. You suck chants intensified. They were very loud, and this was because he made it seem like a clean victory. Then he mentioned the announce table incident and made a sob story out of it. The fans chanted spear, but he flipped it over his head, saying that the fans in Edge cut corners, take shortcuts, and therefore they're losers. He said that unlike them, he's an honest man, that's why he has this. He stands here not to tell them I told you so, but it is so. Damn. Edge, though, interrupted. He admitted that Chris makes a valid point, you know. The fans and himself have something in common, that being they loved watching Edge getting speared. And he was pretty impatient and immediately demanded a rematch for that moment. Problem was Jericho didn't care because, well, he lost. Y2J had the leverage, and he stuck it to the Rated R Superstar, calling him a loser. Hell, he demanded Edge get out of his ring, and it turned into a brawl. Edge undressed him, and apparently Chris was all taped up. He took an execution, and most importantly, a spear. As Edge is walking away, Jack Swagger from out of nowhere emerges and whacks him with a briefcase. He announced the cash in, and it was time. Mike Chioda, the GOAT, sprints down to the ring and rings the bell. Jericho slowly recovers, stirring, turns around. Swagger grabs him and hits the gut wrench, and man, did that look rough. 1, 2, 3, damn. It was definitely a cool moment to watch when it aired. It's a damn world title change. Can't deny that, but one thing I don't get was why his character took a total 180 the moment the bell rang. Why? You could see the enthusiasm and swagger before the bell rang, but once he won the match, it was a different person. Whatever. So Jack's chat. Chris took offense to this and demanded that Teddy reverse the decision. Obviously, he refused to do so because it falls under the rules, and Chris believed that he was taken advantage of, but unless he was willing to compete tonight, there was nothing to talk about. I mean, they better be paying Teddy Long well to deal with toady and impudent superstars. At the end of the night, Jack Swagger, who lost his character, came out to hold a world championship address. He read some speech, Chris Jericho interrupted, and he was in a bad mood. He was begging for Jack to give it back, but he refused. It seemed like Chris couldn't come to terms to this, calling it a robbery and continuously demanding the title back. Despite the injury, Jericho wasn't getting any sympathy, and out came the ultimate opportunist. Swagger backed off, and he received a challenge from one Edge. The Rated R Superstar held himself responsible and suggested he, Jack, face somebody who isn't injured nor afraid of fighting him. Jericho mentioned his victory, at WrestleMania, but Edge reminded him of the 2 spears that essentially cost him the gold. Teddy Long came out to rectify the issue at hand and booked the match. So next week, it was going to be Chris Jericho versus Edge, and the winner of that match will receive the title shot at Extreme Rules against Jack Swagger. After this, Chris hit a code breaker on Edge, and Swagger capitalized with 2 rough-looking gut wrenches on both men to end the show on top. Without his character, I should add. Okay, now that Chris Jericho is once again the challenger, he's getting quite desperate. He was delusionally thinking that he was still the champion, but there wasn't anything he can do but win it back. Swagger was scouting both men, warning them of their impending future. And as for the main event, it was a very competitive bout, but hey, you already know that. By the looks of it, it seemed like Edge was gonna punch his ticket, but it actually turned out to be a double countout. Edge had the advantage initially, but Jericho brought in a chair and he got the spear. Now at this point, there was no #1 contender, but on Raw, David Hasselhoff, of all people, booked the match for Extreme Rules, that being Randy Orton versus Jack Swagger for the World Heavyweight Championship. It sounds funny just saying. Clearly upset Chris, who spared no time in letting everyone know about it. He still believed that he was the rightful champion, but Edge, though, tried to make the case for himself receiving a title shot after Extreme Rules. He believed that Chris was damaged goods and wasn't fit to challenge for the title, and if he has any doubt about that, well, he can spear him right then and there, and we can find out. But Teddy Long came out and rectified the issue at hand by giving Chris Jericho his championship match for tonight. Y2J was very satisfied with the news and guaranteed that he will capture the title. He tried sticking it to Edge, but Teddy informed him that the match was a triple threat match. Jack Swagger was upset with the news, but there was nothing he can do about it. Chris Jericho, meanwhile, believed that he was going to be lucky tonight. As for how it went, it's a gem. I never hear anybody talk about it, and I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember it being good. I think you'll like if you're just bored and you want like 15-20 minutes of wrestling. There was some fun action near falls, and even though Swagger's title reign may be forgettable, this match deserves to be mentioned. Obviously, he retained, and afterwards, you get the gut wrench right on Edge to stand tall after the show. That wasn't even it, though. Chris decides to go after the Achilles in the most impactful way yet, and basically SmackDown ended with there being doubt over Edge's status. They did face off on Raw in a 6-man tag. You know, the Monday Night Stars were stranded. There wasn't that much interaction between the two, and Edge was all good. Shortly afterwards, it was announced that Chris Jericho will face Edge inside a steel cage at Extreme Rules. Before the events, Chris Jericho, of course, had to speak about this. He was claiming that Sunday will be the end of Edge's career, meaning no heroic comebacks, no championship reigns, and most importantly, no spears. He didn't mind the fans chanting spear because it was, in his eyes, going to be the final time they ever will. And he revealed that his intentions for Sunday, he's going to injure the Achilles. He's going to jump off the cage right onto it. And after that, Edge won't be drafted to another show. He'll be drafted to a hospital bed. Edge heard enough, and despite the Achilles, he had a lot of fight in it. He made fun of Jericho's loss to Heath Slater before getting serious. He knew that he was pretty banged up, but nothing was going to stop him from entering that cage on Sunday. Hell, nothing's stopping him from entering the cage right now. The Radar Superstar knew what it takes to come back from an injury, whereas Chris Jericho had no idea. It was basically psychological warfare. He had nothing to lose, and instantly he struck Jericho. The two tried going after the Achilles, and initially this worked, but Edge had a hell of a lot of fight in him. We never got to see that spear, but Barrett ended up being sacrificial lamb. Chris realized that he's going to be locked in with a monster, and the ball was essentially in Edge's court at this point. Like, sure, he has that injury, but he has nothing to lose. Chris lost to a rookie and his head wasn't even in the same place. Before the match, Edge gave his final thoughts and he guaranteed that he won't allow Jericho to escape the cage. Hell, he's not even going to try to allow him to escape the cage. Chris Jericho, on the other hand, wasn't upset over the whole Heath Slater thing, calling himself a big game player, you know, when it matters, he's going to win. He continued promising that Edge's career will be over on this night, and with that, gelatinous people will stop chanting spear, spear, spear because it ends tonight. Okay, this match, I thought it was good. Wasn't as good as WrestleMania. It wasn't a classic, but still, bright spot of the show. Edge at some points felt very deranged. That code breaker is so damn underrated. Like, what the hell is up with it? I always have this spot in my mind, but I never really see it on Twitter or anywhere else. He bounced from side to side. It was very impressive for me. But like I said, when you hear Edge and Jericho, you expect a match of the year candidate. Jericho at times was tortured, and at one point his ankle was caught in between the cage and the door, and Edge started to target the ankle. He hit the spear, and that's it. Edge won, and the feud's over. It was a bit weird. I honestly feel that Edge not winning the title was bizarre, and it's like it halted his momentum. I honestly feel that halted his momentum. The next night, Edge ended up getting drafted to Raw, and Chris Jericho would follow along about an hour later. And how about that face turn Edge made? Well, he turned later that night by costing Randy Orton the title. Oh, and if you thought it was one of those baby faces sending a message thing, well, on SmackDown later that week, Christian of all people managed to bring out the real Edge. Not to mention this because it's essential to the video, and if I don't think I'm ever going to mention this. I mean, what video could this fit in? So he comes out all somewhat emotional about how he's going to Raw, and before leaving he tells the fans that he loves them. This prompts Christian to come out, and Edge praised their storied history before calling Captain Charisma his best friend. He wished him luck on SmackDown, and Christian's response, he said that he knows Edge better than anybody and called him out on his lies. Edge is all confused, where's this coming from? And Christian thought Edge didn't realize how much the fans really respected him, because Edge never really respected them back and only used them to get what he wants. The Ultimate Opportunist made it seem like Christian was jealous and asked him, how many world championships have you won? He didn't answer that question, but we all know he won 2, right? He said that he's not going to win a title by stepping on others' neck, and he was going to call him out right here, right now. He straight up called Edge a liar. Then he admitted it. Christian's right. I can't wait to get off this show, and he revealed that the fans had been his puppets the entire time. As a matter of fact, he enjoyed every second of it. Christian then answered everybody's question on when E and C are going to go after the titles. Well, in his eyes, that ain't going to happen. Quite the contrary. He wants to see Edge versus Christian right now. Obviously, Edge declined, but he delivered a cheap shot, and thus the spear chant was gone. Christian managed to counter, and they brawled. Edge runs away, and his true self emerged. Christian then initiated the hey, 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 goodbye chant for his brother, and so within 90 days, Edge is already a heel once again. I guess it didn't work. Booking problem? Probably. I mean, the feud wasn't even bad, but when you see those two names, you expect some sort of feud that people will still be talking about to this day. The WrestleMania match was awesome in my eyes. Extreme Rules wasn't bad, but the whole story was overshadowed by whatever was going on, be it HBK and Taker or Cena and Batista. I think people are expecting a little too much from them. What I find funny about all this was the fact that on Raw, Christian and Edge became allies. It took a while for Edge to get back in pre-injury form. I'd say when he moved to SmackDown, he was better. And his face run there was also much better in my opinion. By the looks of it, he was motivated and managed to put on great matches against Ray, Kane, Del Rio, and Ziggler. I'll eventually dive into his final title reign, but as for the Jericho feud, I think it left a bit desired. So yeah, what did you guys think of this feud? Please comment down below. And that's the first video. Make sure you hit a code breaker on the like button, and perhaps a spear on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.